The second discovery was this, that the self-image can be changed. Numerous case histories have shown that one is never too young nor too old to change his self-image and thereby start to live a new life. One of the reasons it has seemed so difficult for a person to change his habits, his personality, or his way of life has been that heretofore nearly all efforts at change have been directed to the circumference of the self, so to speak, rather than to the center. Numerous patients have said to me something like the following. If you are talking about positive thinking, I've tried that before and it just doesn't work for me. However, a little questioning invariably brings out that these individuals have employed positive thinking, or attempted to employ it, either upon particular external circumstances or upon some particular habit or character defect. I will get that job. I will be more calm and relaxed in the future. This business venture will turn out right for me, etc. But they had never thought to change their thinking of the self which was to accomplish these things. Jesus warned us about the folly of putting a patch of new material upon an old garment, or of putting new wine into old bottles. Positive thinking cannot be used effectively as a patch or a crutch to the same old self-image. In fact, it is literally impossible to really think positively about a particular situation as long as you hold a negative concept of self. And numerous experiments have shown that once the concept of self is changed, other things consistent with the new concept of self are accomplished easily and without strain. One of the earliest and most convincing experiments along this line was conducted by the late Prescott Leckey, one of the pioneers in self-image psychology. Leckey conceived of the personality as a system of ideas, all of which must seem to be consistent with each other. Ideas which are inconsistent with the system are rejected, not believed, and not acted upon. Ideas which seem to be consistent with the system are accepted. At the very center of this system of ideas, the keystone, the base upon which all else is built, is the individual's ego ideal, his self-image, or his conception of himself. Leckey was a schoolteacher and had an opportunity to test his theory upon thousands of students. Leckey theorized that if a student had trouble learning a certain subject, it could be because, from the student's point of view, it would be inconsistent for him to learn it. Leckey believed, however, that if you could change the student's self-conception, which underlies this viewpoint, his attitude toward the subject would change accordingly. If the student could be induced to change his self-definition, his learning ability should also change. This proved to be the case. One student who misspelled 55 words out of 100 and flunked so many subjects that he lost credit for a year, made a general average of 91 the next year, and became one of the best spellers in school. A boy who was dropped from one college because of poor grades entered Columbia and became a straight A student. A girl who flunked Latin 4 times after 3 talks with the school counselor finished with a grade of 84. A boy who was told by a testing bureau that he had no aptitude for English won honourable mention the next year for a literary prize. The trouble with these students was not that they were dumb or lacking in basic aptitudes. The trouble was an inadequate self-image, saying, "I don't have a mathematical mind, I'm just naturally a poor speller." they identified with their mistakes and failures. Instead of saying, "I failed that test," which is factual and descriptive, they concluded, "I am a failure." Instead of saying, "I flunked that subject," they said, "I am a flunkout." For those who are interested in learning more of Lecky's work, I recommend securing a copy of his book, Self-Consistency, A Theory of Personality. Lecky also used the same method to cure students of such habits as nail-biting and stuttering. My own files contain case histories just as convincing. The man who was so afraid of strangers that he seldom ventured out of the house, and who now makes his living as a public speaker. The salesman who had already prepared a letter of resignation because he just wasn't cut out for selling, and 6 months later was #1 man on a force of 100 salesmen. The minister who was considering retirement because nerves and the pressure of preparing a sermon a week were getting him down, and now delivers an average of 3 outside talks a week in addition to his weekly sermons, and doesn't know he has a nerve in his body. How a plastic surgeon became interested in self-image psychology. Offhand, there would seem to be little or no connection between surgery and psychology. Yet, it was the work of the plastic surgeon which first hinted at the existence of the self-image and raised certain questions which led to important psychologic knowledge. When I first began the practice of plastic surgery many years ago, I was amazed by the dramatic and sudden changes in character and personality which often resulted when a facial defect was corrected. Changing the physical image in many instances appeared to create an entirely new person. In case after case, the scalpel that I held in my hand became a magic wand that not only transformed the patient's appearance, but transformed his whole life. The shy and retiring became bold and courageous. A quote-unquote moronic, stupid boy changed into an alert, bright youngster who went on to become an executive with a prominent firm. A salesman who had lost his touch and his faith in himself became a model of self-confidence. And perhaps the most startling of all was the habitual, hardened criminal who changed almost overnight from an incorrigible who had never shown any desire to change into a model prisoner who won a parole and went on to assume a responsible role in society. Some 20 years ago, I reported many such case histories in my book, New Faces, New Futures. Following its publication and similar articles in leading magazines, I was besieged with questions by criminologists, psychologists, sociologists, and psychiatrists. They asked questions that I could not answer, but they did start me upon a search. Strangely enough, I learned as much, if not more, from my failures as from my successes. It was easy to explain the successes. The boy with the 2 big ears, who had been told that he looked like a taxicab with both doors open. He had been ridiculed all his life, often cruelly. Association with playmates meant humiliation and pain. Why shouldn't he avoid social contacts? Why shouldn't he become afraid of people and retire into himself? Terribly afraid to express himself in any way, it was no wonder he became known as a moron. When his ears were corrected, it would seem only natural that the cause of his embarrassment and humiliation had been removed, and that he should assume a normal role in life, which he did. Or consider the salesman who suffered a facial disfigurement as the result of an automobile accident. Each morning, when he shaved, He could see the horrible, disfiguring scar of his cheek and the grotesque twist to his mouth. For the first time in his life, he became painfully self-conscious. He was ashamed of himself and felt that his appearance must be repulsive to others. The scar became an obsession with him. He was different from other people. He began to wonder what others were thinking of him. Soon, his ego was even more mutilated than his face. He began to lose confidence in himself. He became bitter and hostile. Soon, all his attention was directed toward himself, and his primary goal became the protection of his ego and the avoidance of situations which might bring humiliation. It is easy to understand how the correction of his facial disfigurement and the restoration of a quote-unquote normal face would overnight change this man's entire attitude and outlook, his feelings about himself, and result in greater success in his work. But what about the exceptions who didn't change? The Duchess, who all her life had been terribly shy and self-conscious because of a tremendous hump in her nose. Although surgery gave her a classic nose and a face that was truly beautiful, she still continued to act the part of the ugly duckling, the unwanted sister who could never bring herself to look another human being in the eye. If the scalpel itself was magic, why did it not work on the Duchess? Or what about all the others who acquired new faces but went right on wearing the same old personality? Or how to explain the reaction of those who insist that the surgery has made no difference whatsoever in their appearance? Every plastic surgeon has had this experience and has probably been as baffled by it as I was. No matter how drastic the change in appearance may be, there are certain patients who will insist that I look just the same as before. You didn't do a thing. Friends, even family, may scarcely recognize them, may become enthusiastic over their newly acquired beauty, yet the patient herself insists that she can see only slight or no improvement, or, in fact, deny that any change at all has been made. Comparison of before and after photographs does little good, except possibly to arouse hostility. By some strange mental alchemy, the patient will rationalize, of course, I can see that the hump is no longer in my nose, but my nose still looks just the same. Or, the scar may not show anymore, but it's still there.